The Bosshole Chronicles are brought to you by Real Good Ventures, a talent optimization firm helping organizations diagnose their most critical people and execution issues with world-class analytics. Make sure to check out all the resources in the show notes and be sure to follow us and share your feedback. Enjoy today's episode.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Bosshole Chronicles. It is a delight to be with you again. And as our listeners continue to reinforce, our subject matter expert episodes really are bringing forth transformational information. Today is no exception. But before we get into that, I just wanted to say hello to the best partner and buddy on the planet, my co-host, John Brower. John, how are you today?
Oh, Sarah, thanks. I'm good. It's good to be back and good to have you back in the co-host seat. And yeah, we got another subject matter expert. I'm sorry, we have two co-subject matter experts that are joining us today. Both are co-founders and principals of a consultancy called Mfluent. And we're going to learn about Mfluent in just a little bit. I am talking about none other than Shawna and Robin Reed. We have the privilege of being not only certified partners of the Predictive Index with them, but also certified partners of the Line of Sight Organizational Health Index. And so we've had a chance over the last few months to get to know them. Let me give you a little bit of background. I'll start with Shawna. So Shawna, as I had said, founded or co-founded Mfluent with Robin. Mfluent is a corporate coaching and consulting company that focuses on leadership strategy, talent optimization, and sales arbitrage. Shawna's drive for reimagining what is possible in the workplace has been amplified over her extensive career, where she was a trusted advisor to business owners and HR executives across various industries. And of course, one of the most important things we need to know is that she is an avid golfer along with Robin. Is that correct?
That is correct.
She has corporate affiliations as follows: board and executive committee member with the Arizona Foundation for Women, co-chair of Fund Development Committee with the Arizona Foundation for Women as well, and an active member in She Leads program. Now, let's also find out about Robin. In addition to his work with Shawna at Mfluent, Robin is also the president and CEO of the Black Chamber of Arizona, president of Occam Sustainability Partners, an international sustainability solutions consulting firm that provides energy saving strategy. And he's also recognized as a professional speaker, spoken nationally and internationally on a number of topics, and of course, can be seen side by side with Shawna playing golf. I keep going back to golf because you both live in Arizona, and I'm jealous because you get to go out there and play multiple times a week. Phoenix College President's Advisory Board, also a board member of Treasure House since 2019, Valley of the Sun United Way board member, Arizona State University Knowledge Exchange for Resilience, Council of Resilience Leaders, and ASU WP Carey School of Business, AZ Next Steering Committee. Wow. I think we need now episode 2 to actually have them onto the podcast. But hey, Robin and Shawna, so glad to have you with us, and welcome to the Bosshole Chronicles.
Thank you very much. Really happy to be here.
So my first question is Mfluent. Really interesting name for your consultancy. Please tell us about the name, the origin, and how you came up with it.
Well, early on, what we understood was in the workplace, we call it culture often, right? There's a workplace culture, but Shawna and I believe it's a language, it's a communication. How well does leadership, management, and frontline workers communicate what's important about the advancement of the organization? So in looking at it as a language, we consider ourselves to be fluent in employee-employer communication.
Nice. Okay. Mfluent. I get it now. And when did Mfluent start?
July 2019.
And so one of the things you shared with us, Robin, is the tagline, if you will, for Mfluent is helping leaders lead better companies. Is that accurate?
That is spot on. Yes, we help leaders lead better companies.
And I would imagine that stems from the past, both your past and Shawna's past and the work that you've done. But tell us about your interest in leaders and leadership. Why is that so central to Mfluent's work?
So for me, my background, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've started companies, merged companies, sold companies. And when I wasn't doing that, I was in financial services. And I had the dubious distinction of being a stockbroker on Black Monday back in the 80s. I got my Series 7 when I was 19 for the first time. And I specialized. So I worked for Schwab when he had 2 offices in the entire country. I specialized in working with CEOs in the sale of their restricted stock. And so I became very good at that. But it also told me I had a real comfort in speaking to leaders. That was a more comfortable place for me. And that kind of started me on my path. And throughout my career, I've just always found that I'm more effective when I'm communicating with the leadership of an organization.
And Shawna, for you, the whole idea of working with leaders, what does that stem from?
For me, it stems from, over 20 years before going out on my own with Robin, being an employee, right? Moving my way through the ranks of a specific industry and enjoying opportunities to be a leader. But man, did I notice the difference between when I had a good leader and, as you would say, a boss hole. And whenever I would leave one place to go to another, I'd always think, man, that was so avoidable. And so when I looked at how I could make a difference in another area and help leaders was, how can I get them before they lose their best talent and before they mess it up, right? Just by not being self-aware, not understanding how everyone can get what they want. So that was really where it came out for me. It's much more almost coming from like the bottom up and Robin coming from the top down. And it seemed like a great marriage together to be able to put those together.
Nice. Yeah. So continuing on that, Shawna, if we may, in our preliminary conversation, you were talking about conflict. And obviously, conflict is something that happens within the context of a work relationship. And specifically, leaders needing to know how to use conflict or disagreement in a constructive way. But you've seen it work in both directions. But how do you help leaders really use conflict as a tool for good or in a productive or constructive way?
Yeah, that's a great angle to take it from. So what I have noticed is that when we start with, when I'm working directly with a leader doing coaching and we're talking about whatever conflict may be arising with them and perhaps someone on their team, even sometimes the CEO, whatever level it is we're talking, so much of it comes down to the communication styles. Lack of communication, maybe transparency, but very often if we can understand and I can help bring them back to the self-awareness piece that we worked on, like understanding their own behaviors, the way they like to communicate and why they do it, why they're driven that way. And then the awareness of the people they're dealing with. And typically, if we can take away that narrative that we as people tend to add, we see a behavior and then we add a backstory. Mm-hmm. And very rarely do we assume positive intent. So we come in with this feeling of I've got to defend myself in all these scenarios. And so often if you can take that back, like step back a couple steps and actually look at the conversation that you're about to have and assume to the best of your ability, positive intent, and then just understand the different styles. Mm-hmm. A lot of times conflict just becomes a discussion. As Robin said earlier, we were talking a disagreement, but that's right. Okay. That's healthy. That's how you get to the good place. So I find that when we start there, a lot of it kind of can diffuse itself a little bit naturally.
Well, and we conjure up all kinds of stories in our head. We had an episode a few months ago where our guest was talking about, what was it, Sarah, her inner committee? The committee in your head that conjures up all kinds of crazy stories and jumps to conclusions about something, maybe something a person said or something that they did. And we arrive at this wrong conclusion, which only exacerbates conflict and disagreement. Isn't it amazing, though, when you put the data in front of them, and they start to understand through self-awareness and awareness of others, it is literally transformative.
Absolutely. And I think, I'm kind of stealing it, but Robin, when we were having our pre-talk, made the comment about celebrating. So it's also not just understanding why people are the way they are, but finding out how to celebrate and be happy that you bring that specific unique trait and way you communicate to the table. It really can change the entire perspective, which again, takes conflict and it makes it difficult to get there unless you're just trying to.
Well, let's talk about that. And so, Robin, continue on that, if you would, on the idea of celebrating your unique characteristics and qualities. Because as we know, as PI professionals, there are 17 reference profiles, all of which are unique and different and should be celebrated. But how do you help people or a person get to the idea that how you're wired really is unique and should be celebrated?
Well, I can tell you because we did it just this past Saturday. Shawna and I provided a workshop to a wonderful organization. And one of the things we did as we went around the room and had each person share their profile, we asked the rest of the organization, and this was the leadership team of a very successful Arizona nonprofit, but we asked the rest of them, tell me how this person's traits benefit the company. And when you hear 11 of your coworkers say, oh, yeah, I do know that about him or her. And here's where it's really good for us. It elevates the individual that they're referring to, but it also imprints in the minds of the people sharing that, oh, that's right, that's value. This individual's personality brings value because they're very good at, moving the needle, or they're very good at slowing us down when we get too excited and want to rush, head on, and they see that we're running toward a brick wall and they're telling us just slow down. And so that's one great way that it does it, because it allows people to realize not only individually are they great for the organization with where they work, but the others around them are as well. Because often after you get hired, you become task oriented and you forget that there were values that your employer thought you had. And that's why they hired you.
Yeah. I'm intrigued because recently we were working with an executive group that is so if we look at it from the team design standpoint, in other words, we know that every team is perfectly designed to get the results they get, and we can identify or diagnose what kind of team they are. This was an exploring and a pathfinding team, meaning they were moving very fast, but they had some balance. They had some people that we would call stabilizing individuals that actually were more quiet. And when they slowed down to get their input and they realized, oh my gosh, this is so critical for our success. We can't blow past that input. People start to recognize that every individual in this organization provides something unique. But if we don't take the time to really tap into that, we can really drive down this pathway way too fast to just ruination. And we've got to be very careful about it.
I think the self-awareness piece, Shawna, that you talked about, I think of it in terms of drives, needs, and behaviors. When we help individuals who are in relationship with one another in the workplace understand that sometimes their drives are competing, it does cut through the drama and the tendency we have to create the story. I think that is so powerful. And I love that you touched on that. And if I bring that together with celebrating who we are, it's occurred to me a lot recently. I've had a number of conversations with young people who have recently graduated from college and are now finding themselves in the workforce. And they're kind of like, what is going on? They're experiencing managers who project and sort of guess about what they're going to be good at. And they do that just based on some of the experience they've had with them. Maybe they're just kind of crossing their fingers and hoping this young person will be able to fulfill on that. So as you guys were talking about just developing that kind of self-awareness, if anything, we would want to equip these young individuals to appreciate who they are, what their drives and needs are, and then how they're going to have to adapt. Because of course, when you start off in a new job, it's not all you expect it's going to be. And I don't want to go down a path in a different direction than we need to here, but the celebrating who the person is, I think sometimes managers and hiring leaders think they're doing that based on the resume and the great conversation they had and what they observed. But unless they know, the real essence of that person based on their natural behavioral drives and needs, can they really optimize that individual? And I think the same is true in conflict. So I was picking up what you were putting down there about ways to help people cut through the baloney and get to real helpful solutions together so they don't go home at night replaying that videotape in their mind or that audio tape in their mind about the conversation that was challenging. And
I was just going to say, Sarah, one thing I just want to add what you were saying. I feel like that exact reason. The other thing, we talk about, I know with MPI and stuff as well, is the common language. What I will tell you is when we were done in each one of these that we have done recently, it also, after everyone got done celebrating and understanding and feeling good about each other's differences, they were ready and they had a plan for, okay, so in the future, when I am the person who asks all the questions, or I'm the person who does this, we can kind of even laugh about, remember, I'm the one that holds this down, or I'm the one. Yeah. And now me saying, hey, can you give me a minute, or whatever it was, doesn't feel like, oh, well, sorry, I offended. You know what I mean? It really just takes the sting out of the differences. And I think that other piece was what was so transformative, even just from a period of time where we all celebrated each other in a way that it had substance, right? It's not just a feel good, it's necessary. And then watching how they're going to change their behavior going forward, I think is probably the most unique part of all of this. And that's what gets us excited.
Mm-hmm. And I think to add to that is that, along with being celebrated, the one universal thing that I think exists through any relationship, work, marriage, kids, whatever, is people want to feel valued. Mm-hmm. When you speak to someone in their language, they feel valued. So if someone is more deliberate in their process. So we coach employers, hey, when you call a meeting, if you know that you got an employee that prefers to see the agenda first, send them the agenda. Just send it. They're going to read it, but send it to everybody, because somebody else doesn't want to be left off. They have no intention of reading the agenda ahead of time,
right?
But they don't want to be excluded. By giving them that time, by giving them the permission to just walk into the meeting comfortably with ideas, you get a better outcome from the meeting, of course, but that individual felt valued. They didn't feel like they had to fit into this one little box, because if you have weekly meetings, they're feeling that anxiety every week. Right. What if you took that away? What greater production and contribution could you get out of that individual if you took away weekly anxiety? Because we know week over week over week, pretty soon they leave one meeting and the anxiety already starts for the next meeting a week from now. Right. So we really work with them on understanding what the benefit of all of this is too. It really isn't supposed to just be all warm and fuzzy and kumbaya. This actually has a very practical business benefit.
Right. And I think back about your example over the weekend of where you had this amazing awareness when people started to hear the value they brought to it. Without a very intentional step like that, we make some wild assumptions or something that, based on the behavior that we see. And that's the only thing we get to see based on drives, needs, and behavior. But what we refer to as the fundamental attribution error, where we will see something and we'll make assumptions about a person's behavior. Let's say they don't contribute in a meeting. They're reticent. They just sit there. Well, somebody could very easily misinterpret that as, well, they don't care. They're not even contributing. Well, they're processing that. But without the data that you're talking about, we go off in a different direction and we make these terrible, terrible errors. But something, Robin, that you said as we were talking before the podcast about, I love the phrase, you use the phrase, holding on too tight. I'd like to unpack that a little bit more in the context of that. We've been having some conversations. As a matter of fact, this week's podcast with Ravi Shanshiri, he talked about, hey, if you ever played baseball, if you're holding that bat too tight, you gotta be loose. But if you're holding it too tight, it's like a golf club. You're holding it too tight, you're going to be very ineffective in your swing. So when you say holding on too tight when it comes to leadership, tell us more about that.
So, and I've seen this certainly more recently, as we call it, the Great Resignation, as employees and employers are finding themselves at odds about things like remote work, hybrid work, et cetera. You're seeing a lot of organizations and management in particular start to draw lines in the sand. This has to happen or you don't have a job. But conversely, you're seeing employees feeling empowered enough to say, that's okay. I'll make it easy for you. I don't want the job. I'm going to go over here. And don't let me forget, I want to share with you something. I had lunch with a gentleman who had a previous exit from his other tech company at $98 million and has jumped back in and is doing it all over again. And he really gave me a great overview of how he sees this. But when I say holding on too tight, it's when people are uncomfortable, they hold on tight. Imagine being on a roller coaster or anything else, right? When you aren't prepared for the next turn that's coming, the first thing you do is grip the bars tighter on a roller coaster. Even though it's safe, you could put your hands up in the air and you're still going to be fine. But instinctively, we grip tighter.
Yeah.
And as employers grip tighter, as managers grip tighter, they start to restrict the contribution of employees because you start to direct their behavior instead of value their contribution. And that's really the key. When you direct someone's behavior versus valuing their contribution, you begin to separate in your direction. Because to me, that's the time that a manager or a boss hole, if you will, should actually be approaching these employees and saying, hey, we're in this new place. Let's come together and share ideas. How do we get to where we want to go from where we are? Because we didn't intend to be here. But now that we're here, we all have an obligation to get to the next place from where we stand. How do we do that? You know, you've got to assume you hired quality people. Otherwise, they shouldn't work for your company. They never should have been hired if you didn't think they were quality individuals. But once you hire them, treat them that way and get that involvement. Again, relax. Loosen up. Don't assume that a bunch of adults who have households and families and are caregivers and contributors in their churches and everywhere else, don't assume that all of a sudden they became completely inept and need someone to tell them what to do and how to do it. But again, bring it together as more of a collaborative approach. That requires kind of loosening your grip, loosening that need to hold on. And if I can extend that a little bit, one of the things I often see is when a manager is not setting their individual sights on advancing within an organization, then they hold too tight to the position they hold within the organization. But we know great leaders are always looking for someone to replace them. The best leaders on the planet always want someone, they're always grooming someone to take their job because their sights are set on the next job they want, the next opportunity they want. When someone is getting too restrictive, when they can't they can't chart their own course for advancement, then they hold on too tight to the job they have. Then all of a sudden you've got a log jam because it starts to bottleneck at their position because now you got 2 or 3 people that can do their job. And now you've created conflict, versus collaboration, which everybody should be moving within an organization when you're doing it right.
Absolutely. As it relates to relaxing, a phrase that comes to mind is leaders need to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, because that is uncomfortable for some people. Relaxing, especially those of us with high dominance or very to extremely high dominance, the need for control, the need to hold on and grip pretty tightly is extreme and very profound. Do you think that means we are looking at a different kind of leader moving forward?
I'll weigh in on one thing I was just thinking as you were saying that. I do think that one piece I've liked to see, organizations are starting to get a little bit more open with the term leader versus manager, right? And I definitely would tell you, like, even for Robin and I, when we talk about as we grow and as we bring on additional help within Influent, we already know that Robin is a dynamic leader. He really enjoys being able to help chart a course and have vision and think in a certain way and be able to really take us, in that direction. And I'm a different type of leader. And we've already said that as we start to bring in new trainers and other people that need to be maybe have a little bit more of that, kind of people first, that would be my type of leadership. So even knowing within an organization, a leader can be a leader. They do not need to be a manager. If they should not be a manager, let's not put them in those positions. They're usually not enjoying it while it's happening. Nobody who's underneath them enjoys it. So that's another piece we work really hard is say, we don't have to take people out of leadership roles if they're really good at one thing. But if we're finding that the people thing the people part of it is making them unhappy and everyone they're supposed to be managing unhappy, how do we move that? How do we make it you don't have people going out the back end because of something so preventable? So I wanted to jump in because I think as we're saying this, the term leader and manager are different. They sometimes are exactly the same. They should, if you're a good manager, you should be a good leader, but they're not just one and the same.
No, that's true. I mean, in a recent presentation, I said, leadership is a state of influence with other people. Management is a position of authority over other people. Now, sometimes you get both, but you don't have to be a manager to be an awesome leader, and you don't have to be a leader to be just a manager. But when you can get both, Shawna, to your point, yes. The thing that's interesting is that when people look at the reference profiles, and there are 17 of them, they say, well, who makes the best leaders? And I know that all of us answer the question. Everyone can lead. They're just going to lead from that point of origin. You just have to help them unpack and understand the beauty of their leadership DNA, but it's going to be different for all of them.
the part that kind of concerns me is we're talking a lot about the way organizations need to structure themselves and approach leadership. But I don't know that many organizations know how to actualize that, because it sounds good in theory. But then if you sit with a group of, say, executive leadership team, or you sit with the CEO of an executive leadership team and you talk about each one of the individuals on the team and their superpower and where they might have challenges and traps, and you say to the CEO, hey, is that the right person for the job? And how often it is they say, no. I mean, sometimes they don't hesitate. Sometimes they think for a long time and like, not really. We have to help organizations, or said this way, organizations need to do a better job of designing that leadership pathway. So if there is a superpower, does it have to entail management? I think there's some places where people need help with that. Would you agree?
Definitely. We were actually working with another technology company, very significant in size. I think they do about $250 million in revenue. Mm-hmm. And the CEO was telling us this. He was walking through this process of explaining how he had hired, his HR director had hired someone, but he didn't think the person was the right person for the job. So you now had conflict between the CEO and the CHRO, and then the person ended up not working out. But because they didn't have an arbitrary tool to show why either one of them might be valid in their gut, mm-hmm. they ended up wasting a lot of money, because now you have a disenchanted employee that you've now promoted, that you've now demoted, and it was a mess when it could have been, wait, here, let's show you why. Because sometimes our gut feeling isn't a gut feeling, it's a personal feeling.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That person isn't like me, so they rub me the wrong way. Mm-hmm. But truthfully, this person wouldn't have had direct communication ongoing with the CEO anyway. So the CEO's liking or disliking the individual was irrelevant.
It's kind of, meaningless
to the purpose of the individual.
Right.
So, and conversely, the CHRO might have just said, oh, that person's so much like me. I get it. I get them. I like them. And that may have been irrelevant as well, right. Where we can separate that out and say, here, let's just look at the traits. Let's look at the person, the responsibilities, and the opportunity that we're trying to create from that. Mm-hmm. And is there a match there? Because maybe what we need to find is, CEO, the two of you don't really work the same. CHRO, you two work almost too much the same. Is there someone else within the organization that might be best suited to manage you? Mm-hmm. And again, we can show you that. We can just show it to you so simply, where it takes the guesswork and the personalities out, and it just says, let's use the science to do the work for us.
Yeah. Or as we say, data, not drama. Let's get it off get that off the table. Really quick. It's funny. We have a client that called me and said, hey, we got this person. We love this person. By the way, Shawna, it's a promoter. By the way, everybody, Shawna's a promoter and Robin is a captain, but they love this candidate. And I said, oh, that's nice. But they said, not anywhere near the target. And I said, all right, well, what do we do? And I said, well, I'm not going to tell you what to do in terms of hiring or not hiring. And I said, but you know exactly what you're getting. And he said, well, my concern is that it's not anything like the target. And I think this person is going to struggle. And I said, that's a reasonable conclusion. Great briefcase, but we have to understand the behavioral match for this. And the funny thing is, as I said, of course you love them. This was a promoter. This was somebody with extremely high extroversion, but that's not what you were looking for. And I said, so these biases that can influence these decisions internally are made so much easier to manage when we just look at the data. Doesn't mean this person wouldn't be great in another capacity, perhaps, or if they hire this person, they know exactly what they're getting, what they're getting. There's no mystery, no guessing. And so let's take the emotion and the drama out of it. Robin, I wanted to get back to your lunch example. I didn't want to gloss over that. You said, hey, let me get back to this conversation I had over lunch. What was that? So
he had this really interesting, he painted this picture of, he said, so what happened? How did we get where we are with the Great Resignation? And he said, it dawned on me one day. The pandemic has caused everybody to go home to work. So their portal to their employer is a computer. Mm-hmm. So if you're there focused on your portal to your employer, and an email comes in from a prospective employer saying, basically, point your portal this way and we'll give you another $10,000 a year. He said, it's hard to say no because in your mind, all I did was point my computer this way and I'm doing the same work. He said, because what isn't being considered is, well, right now I have an 11-minute commute. If I actually went to work there, it would be a 37-minute commute. Right now, they offer childcare. The other place would not. Like, you don't have to consider all of those things. So he says, there's a real shift in what an employer-employee relationship is, because it's no longer all of the other conveniences relative to that individual. It is literally a portal to a workspace.
Right.
And now you're just getting offers from other portals for different dollar amounts just to log into somebody else's server.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That's a unique way to look at it.
To me, it was an epiphany when he said, I'm like, oh my gosh, I never thought of all the things we don't think about now. We only think of being home. But when you think of all the things he just said, that always factors in, especially if you're in a big city. You would totally weigh the pros and cons.
Absolutely.
It's just sobering. That's the word I was thinking of or looking for. It's sobering to realize it's come down to that.
Right.
And we've got to pay attention. We've got to pay much closer attention.
And I know all four of us have had conversations with our CEOs saying, this is what you have to understand. This is what's happening. Yep. And we've had pushback. I know you have too. People saying, oh, no. I mean, we're not going to get that kind of point. We're going to have people come back to work and this is the date we're going to do it. And I said, okay, you go ahead and test that and let people know that you're mandating they're coming back to work on a particular date. And we had a CEO was told by one of, the middle managers saying, if you require me to do that, I'm leaving. And he was shocked by it. And it's like, don't be shocked. It's a different place. It's a different day. Bearing that in mind, I have a question for both of you. So for our listeners and our, managers that are trying to avoid the boss hole zone and our business leaders that don't want those to exist for their managers, if you could pick one thing that you think, hey, over the horizon, keep your eyes on this. This is the one thing from Robin or from Shawna, and I'd like to get one from each of you. Just say, keep your eye on this because this is really going to help you and be transformative as you grow and build your business moving into the new year.
And I don't mean this to sound like a sales pitch, but I really do believe very much in predictive index. But I would say, listen, if you want a really easy way to understand how to value your employees, because we all know we should, but we actually don't all know how. I think understanding their behavioral profile is really the shortcut. It is an amazing shortcut. Many companies lose employees while they're searching for that shortcut. Predictive index provides that shortcut. It shows you how to value the individual you hired, not the resume you hired, not the job responsibility you hired, but the individual you hired. So I would say, the best thing they can do is figure out how to value the people they have.
Shawna, what do you think?
Actually, I agree with Robin. The only thing I would take a step further is this most recent workshop. I'm sure you're both are familiar with it, but the ones that were just speaking of, where you get that, a lot of times an immediate team together, and there's just this opportunity for everyone. We said that they not only get to have people recognize and say, oh yeah, I did notice that about you, and that is really good in this place. So we get that out of there. I notice while you're looking at the person who everyone's chiming in about, you see the look on their face to actually know that their coworkers recognize that about them, even leaders that are like, wow. And then lastly, when we're looking at everyone mapped out on this beautiful quadrant where we're seeing how unique our team looks when it's just visually there, I have actually seen people who, contrary to what they would have done looking for a new teammate, have actually said, wow, we don't really have anyone down here. Should we be looking for someone who can help fill this gap? So all of a sudden they're seeing, instead of us hiring like people we know that just are like us and they communicate like us, we actually are realizing we would be much more powerful if we got a couple more people here. And that, to me, when you get people thinking like that, instead of going to the default of, oh, I have a friend who's just like me, I'll bring them over. That creates the diversity and all the things we say we want. And so I just feel like that piece of it, if you can really do those two things, and PI is the perfect conduit for that, I think that it'll be very difficult for you to not have a better workplace.
I think something that's really very special and that we have learned about the two of them is they refer to themselves not as go-getters, but as go-givers. And so, Robin, Shawna, just tell us a little bit more about what that means.
From our standpoint, a go-giver is someone who is confident in being the first to give, to share, to help. We don't consider anyone to be a competitor because living in an abundance mindset, there's enough for everyone. So if you can bring value to someone else's organization, even if they offer a similar service to your own, we're okay with that because we know that to get where we are, a number of people who didn't have to help us at all have given us an immense amount of help. And we love functioning in a world that's like that.
That's great. Well, thank you both so much. It has been such a pleasure getting to know you both more. I know we're going to be working more in the future, but I would encourage everybody, check out the resources in the show notes. And Shawna and Robin are some truly amazing people. And thanks for being on the podcast. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Sarah. We really enjoyed it.
We'd like to thank our guests today on the Bosshole Chronicles. And if you have a Bosshole Chronicles story of your own, please email us at mystory@thebossholechronicles.com. Once again, mystory@thebossholechronicles.com. We'll see you again soon.